A forgotten horror movie lost to the passage of time, and it's only been a year. The Night House premiered at Sundance in January of 2020, and wasn't given a full theatrical release until August of 2021, because 2020. And even then, it only recouped $15 million. It's not a horror movie with a lot of jump scares or over-the-top kills. It's more of a mystery, a psychological thriller about a woman in peril. It takes elements from haunted house and ghost stories, but ultimately it's a moody and serious affair. The filmmakers cited Hitchcock as an influence, so it's not exactly a traditional horror approach. The look of the film is organic. Not every image is crisp and clean. There's a grainy texture which appears to be a conscious choice. The lighting is soft and warm, with an emphasis on heavy shadows. The visual compositions have been carefully constructed for some unsettling images creeping around the edge of the frame, the kind of blink and you miss it approach to horror. Though there are a few loud musical stings to shock the audience, the score is mostly subdued, an underlying, foreboding presence building tension throughout the film. Director David Bruckner previously directed The Ritual, a slow-burn horror movie that was sold to Netflix for $4.75 million. The Ritual had a wonderful setup where a group of guys go hiking after the death of a friend and encounter a nefarious supernatural presence, but then when the source of the horror is revealed, it becomes much less scary. The Night House is a mystery which could be interpreted multiple ways, and this might be one of its greatest assets. The screenwriters of The Night House, Ben Collins and Luke Piotrowski, actually wrote the new Hellraiser movie, which piques my interest for that one, because The Night House is not like a conventional horror movie. It's the story of Beth, played by Rebecca Hall, who is grieving the loss of her deceased husband, Owen. He took his own life not long before the events of the film. Beth's home is a tomb filled with artifacts of their time together as she sleepwalks through her life. Her friends Claire and Mel, played by Sarah Goldberg and Vondie Curtis Hall, are constantly trying to pull her back into reality as she goes down a rabbit hole, discovering that her husband might not have been exactly the man she thought he was. The Night House is about a type of fear that feels grounded in reality. There are a complex web of emotions that make up Beth's mental state. She's facing loss, separation, and loneliness, so the audience should always be questioning how Beth perceives the world around her. At any moment in the film, it could be that Beth is being haunted by the spirit of her dead husband, pursued by a demonic entity, or she could be entirely delusional. The story might not sound that original, but Rebecca Hall gives an intense performance. She's both unhinged and vulnerable. Everything in the film revolves around Beth. The viewer is very much inside her head. The story progresses by first slowly building up the character of Beth for the audience, then plunging her into a series of events that defy the conventional logic of time and space. Many viewers will wonder why there is so little action in the first hour of the movie. It's because The Night House is more of a chamber drama than a fright fest. The supernatural elements aren't explained until the final 20 minutes of the movie. This might frustrate some viewers who will find this movie to be a waste of time where nothing happens. But nothingness is actually at the core of The Night House's big mystery. The Night House utilizes precise cinematography and set design to create the image of an empty spaceman, a personification of separation and absence, achieved with an optical illusion. The empty spaceman haunts Beth throughout the film. His first appearance is genuinely chilling. It's an effective jump scare because it's very minimal and realistic, the kind of fear where you think maybe my mind is just playing tricks on me. Later scenes in the film become more elaborate, the house changing shape to create the image of the inverse figure. Beth is watching a version of herself with her head in Owen's lap. Then she becomes that version in Owen's lap, though it's no longer Owen, it's the empty spaceman looming over her. Owen appears in the film as both a memory and an antagonistic presence. The audience can never be sure of anything about Owen because it's all framed through Beth's perception of him. Beth's friends are worried that she's suicidal after Owen's death. Beth is seen early in the film looking at pictures of guns online after her husband uses one on himself. She's first looking at pictures of homes, though she drifts off into a fantasy and is suddenly looking at guns. She hasn't moved since Owen's death. The memory of Owen is particularly strong because not only did they reside in the house together, but Owen built the house. While looking through Owen's belongings, Beth discovers a reverse floor plan for a house, inversely identical to the one she lives in. She also discovers a picture of a woman who looks very similar to her. The idea of doppelgängers is a persistent theme. An invisible ferryman takes Beth across the lake to a house on the other side, which is the mirror image of her own home. When she enters the home, she sees herself asleep back in the real world. The film plays around with the concept of reality as Beth is shifting in and out of dream states throughout the story. The Night House is a film about mirror images, the world we live in, and another outside of our perception. There are the multiple women who all look like Beth in Owen's phone. There is the memory of Owen as a good man and the person he might have been. There's Beth's home and the inverse Night House, which seems to exist in an illusory spirit realm. The home sits by a lake, so its reflection is cast into the lake. There are twin moons shining when the empty spaceman confronts Beth during the finale, a light world and a shadow world, so to speak. Beth's friends are trying to bring her into the light as she is tempted by a descent into darkness. The final explanation of what's really going on is somewhat ambiguous. When Beth was a teenager, she was involved in a car accident in Tennessee and died for a few minutes, but she was brought back. She didn't witness any white light or have a life-affirming spiritual experience. Instead, she simply experienced nothingness. This experience has left an imprint on Beth, and she's become a pessimistic and depressed person, while Owen was the one who could always bring her out of it. She feels like she infected him with her negativity and that's why he killed himself. We learn about Owen's death during a scene in which Beth is at work and dealing with an upset parent. It's effective in giving us exposition regarding the plot while framing it through the characterization of a grieving state.
He took the boat out on the lake, he took a handgun that I didn't even know that we owned, and pow, right in the mouth.
It's revealed that when Owen left Beth the note after his suicide about nothing being after her, he meant nothing was the name of the invading entity, a personification of death. Nothing is coming for you. Nothing is real. He's coming to get you, he's right over there, that kind of nothing. Nothing has been hunting Beth her whole life. He tried to convince Owen to kill her, but Owen was too strong and resisted. However, Owen killed a whole slew of other women to try and trick Nothing. This just sounds to me like Beth is delusional and trying to cope with the fact that her husband was a serial killer by justifying his murder of women who looked like her as some kind of protection. Owen also built the inverse house as a way of trapping Nothing there so that it couldn't get to Rebecca. This is interesting because there have been old theories about using mazes to trap evil spirits in. The idea is that the spirits will be confused outside of their realm, so they'll get lost or stuck or head back to the spirit realm. The Winchester house was supposedly designed with staircases leading to nowhere and doors leading to a huge fall below for this reason. I wonder if those staircases leading to nowhere in the Castlevania games are also a reference to this. The eerie statue that Beth finds in the inverse house is a magical item meant to bind one of the other women to the dark entity. Owen first tried killing other women to trick the entity, but eventually he couldn't bring himself to do it anymore, and tried to use a magical item to attach the entity to a Beth lookalike.
I had this dream. I dreamed I was you.
Beth ends up twisted into the same position as the bound figure after she touches the item and brings it home with her. It's a good lesson. Don't pick up cursed items from haunted places and bring them home with you. Nothing was working its way into Owen's head to convince him to kill Beth, but Owen killed himself first and thought Beth would be safe. It's actually Beth's investigation into the death of her husband that causes her to confront Nothing. Owen could be seen as a heroic protector, but he also murdered multiple innocent women, so he's also a deranged lunatic, unless we're taking this all in as Beth's delusion. There's a scene where Beth is dragged by room after room of the house, witnessing her beloved Owen murdering different women in different rooms. This all works on a metaphorical level. The idea that Beth's negativity, her obsession with nothingness, and the lack of any meaning in life affected Owen and caused him to become obsessed as well, eventually leading him towards murder and suicide. One interpretation of the Night House is that Beth is unable to cope with the fact that her husband was unfaithful to her and is a possible serial killer, so she imagines a situation where he was seducing and killing women in order to protect her. If these events are all to be taken as a metaphor, it's a movie about a woman battling depression and anxiety in the wake of her husband's suicide. In the last shot of the film, Mel asks Beth what she's staring at, and she says, "Nothing." Then the empty spaceman is revealed in the shadow over the lake. Beth will always be facing a fear of death. It's not something they'll be conquered in a day. When someone loses a loved one, it's something they're always going to live with, a shadow that will always be there in the minds of those who grieve. I originally watched The Night House last fall, but I enjoyed it even more on the rewatch. It's a film with subtle horror that is ultimately a tragic story. Rebecca Hall's performance captures the state of someone who may be mentally unwell and in need of help. It's heavier on characterization and themes, and lighter on plot. The dreamlike logic of the film's construction creates a moody and surreal beauty in its images. The themes about mental health are present, but not overstated. The more you stare at this film, the more it stares back. The small details add up when you examine them more closely. I appreciate The Night House more now because once I understood the mystery of the film's story, I could watch certain scenes differently with a newfound appreciation for the writing and performances. I will actually go with a 9 out of 10 for this film. Maybe I rate some films too high, but I'd rather be more passionate about movies that fall through the cracks. Upon the first viewing, I would have given it an 8, but now, given the passage of time, I think that it's aged well. This film that was shot in the long, long ago before time of 2019.